Okay, we're ready to talk about our next type of epithelium, which is simple cuboidal epithelium. Again, remember that this is one layer of cells. A lot of times when we find simple cuboidal epithelium, we're not going to draw it like it's one flat layer of cells. We're going to draw it like it's in this kind of a shape of a tube kind of going around, because you know what? One of the places that we find simple cuboidal epithelium are in these little tubes that we have that make up an important structure called the nephron in our kidneys. So here is our diagram of simple cuboidal epithelium. You can imagine the nuclei that are just like this. Okay? All right. So simple cuboidal epithelium, again, it's one layer of cube-shaped, of cuboidal cells. Okay, let's talk about its function. Simple cuboidal epithelium has two basic functions: absorption and secretion. Absorption and secretion. If you can imagine, like, there's fluid in the middle of this tube right here, it can absorb. Let me put that in maybe red. We'll draw a red arrow. That's like absorption right there. Stuff in the inside here, the liquid in the inside is moving into these cells. That's absorption. And then maybe in let's do pink, we have some product being secreted into the inside of this area too. That would be secretion. So the job of this type of epithelium is absorption and secretion. Here, we'll do this. We'll kind of underline secretion there and absorption there, so we have this color-coded. Okay, now, where do we find this in the body? Let's give some examples of locations. Where do we find simple cuboidal epithelium? Well, a great place to find it are what we call the renal tubules in the kidneys. In fact, this diagram that I drew you right here is modeled after what we would find in the renal tubules. And we'll get a chance to discuss that both at the later portion of this class, General A&P, and also when you take Advanced Anatomy and Physiology. Okay, another place that we can find simple cuboidal epithelium are comprising some small glands. And thirdly, we find some on the surface of the ovaries. If I were going to remember one of these, I think that this is the one that I would remember, the renal tubules. In fact, the slide preparations that we'll see have lots of simple cuboidal epithelium visualized there. So let's take a minute and take a look at some simple cuboidal epithelium. Okay, we're back at the University of Michigan's virtual Slidebox website. This is, again, an excellent website. We're going to just click in. This is a sample of a kidney, so we'll start kind of clicking in and zooming in. And we have to wait. We have to be patient when you're doing it at home as well. Be patient as you still visualize some pixelation here. Just wait for your internet speed to kind of catch up. Otherwise, you'll kind of click through and you'll find yourself having to refresh the page altogether. So we'll be patient. We can see that it becomes a little more clear. Give it another click. And you're probably becoming impatient because you're so excited to see simple cuboidal epithelium at this point. we'll keep clicking in, and perhaps you can start to visualize these kind of circular appearing tubes, and we'll see if we can find one that's a really good fit and really well demonstrates exactly what we're looking for. And I think I've found one that I really like. We can see that the nuclei appear to be darker in color. They're staining more purplish. The rest of the cell body is staining this pinkish color. And if you look around, look at the nuclei, how spherical they are. They are in the center of the cell. So we have these cuboidal shaped cells, these cube shaped cells that are forming this one layer of a tubule. Now, some of you probably think, well, wait a second. If I look at this and this, isn't that two layers? Well, you have to look at the structure as it's going around just one circle. So we're not seeing concentric rings, we're just seeing circles next to circles. So this is considered to be one cell layer. So it's simple cuboidal epithelium, and this is a really good example. Here's another good example. As I kind of pull this over, you can see the cell shape really very well. And so I hope this helps you. I hope you're getting a feeling for what simple cuboidal epithelium looks like. And you can go to the University of Michigan's virtual slide box just by doing a simple Google search on your own and come up with the same slide, and that would be a good exercise to do. Okay, we're ready for our next variety of epithelium. This is our third variety of epithelium that we're going to talk about, and it's simple columnar epithelium. After this variety, we will have completed all of these simple varieties of epithelium: simple squamous, simple cuboidal, and now simple columnar. And you know, when we draw a simple columnar epithelium, we can kind of draw it like this. This would be a really kind of a good way to draw this. I'm going to kind of draw a cell like this, and then we'll draw another one up here like this, and another one like this. They're really tall cells. Kind of drawing, I should draw kind of that fuzzy, there's a little bit of a fuzzy border, kind of what they call a brush-like border on the surface, on one surface of the membrane. It's formed by these undulations, these ripples of the plasma membrane called microvilli. And in the small intestine, it provides for more surface area because, again, this simple columnar epithelium, like simple cuboidal epithelium, has as its function, its primary function, absorption and secretion. We also find that some simple columnar epithelium is ciliated, and it provides for the movement of substances over its surface. The cilia are like these hair-like extensions that extend from the surface, or one surface of the cell, called the apical surface, and they can provide for the movement of like mucus or reproductive fluids across its surface. But mainly, if I were going to pick a function, I would pick absorption and secretion. If we find this in the GI tract, sometimes we get the secretion of digestive enzymes from these cells at the brush border especially. So let me just annotate this here. Let me call this the brush border. Now, not all simple columnar epithelium has a brush border, but when I'm thinking of a primary example of where we'd find simple columnar epithelium, and that's the small intestine, those small intestine simple columnar cells, largely they do have a brush border made up of what we call microvilli. So where can we find simple columnar epithelium? Okay, we'll give some examples. of locations. Number one, the primary place that I would, if I was looking for simple columnar epithelium, if I was going to make a choice of where to look for it, I would look for it in the GI tract, or the gastrointestinal tract. From really the stomach to about the anal canal. We'll be really specific, we'll kind of say the rectum. We find it in the stomach, we find it in the small intestine, we find it in the large intestine, we find it in the rectum. Okay. Again, in that area, its job is absorption and secretion. Okay. We can also find it in the uterine tubes or the fallopian tubes. We'll call those the oviducts. And part of the uterus as well. We find it in the gallbladder. We also find it in some ducts of glands. These are all examples of where we might find it. If I was going to pick one, I would pick this one right here. Specifically, if you said the small intestine, that would be a great place to find simple columnar epithelium. Let's next take a look and see if we can find an example. Okay, looking for an example of simple columnar epithelium. This is a transection of the small intestine. This is muscle. This is all muscle. This is the circular muscle, and then what we'll call longitudinal muscle around the small intestine. And the inside, this is what we'll describe later in our digestive unit as the mucosa of the small intestine. And as we zoom in on this mucosa, we're going to find a great example of simple columnar epithelium. Can you see how we have these layers of finger-like projections? We find these finger-like projections that are extending out into the lumen, the opening. And as we zoom in, look at what we'll find. We're going to zoom in here, and we're going to find these tall cells. Can you see how the nuclei, they're kind of oval shaped or egg shaped, and we find cell next to cell next to cell next to cell. In fact, if we look over on this side here, it's a really good example of simple columnar epithelium. It is not all that well visualized, but you kind of see a hazy border here at the apical surface. That's that brush-like border. That's the brush-like border that's visualized there. I'm going to see if I can find you a little bit better example here before we move on. Okay, now this is a really good example, probably better than the last. Look at this. Look at these tall columnar cells stacked one next to another. They almost look like dominoes stacked up one next to another. They're tall and thin. And you see kind of this hazy brush-like border. The microvilli make that hazy brush-like border. And this is the surface. This is what the surface of the small intestine looks like. It's a surface that's well equipped for absorption and secretion. And it's the simple columnar epithelium that provides that ability. And so here's a great example. I'm going to zoom out before I cut away from this particular view, just so you can find a bit of an appreciation here for what the whole tissue looks like and where this is coming from. Perfect.